Hello and welcome into the Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Stephen Alexander Simmons. This fortnightly podcast covers various topics relating to subjects from career and work, health, nutrition and well-being to parenting, relationships, and much more. Each episode will deal with a particular area of these. So, if you are interested in learning and hearing some different thoughts, ideas, and even get some tips or helpful suggestions on these areas of life, or perhaps you are into self-development, then we hope you will stay with us and hopefully enjoy a fun, insightful, and what we hope will be an interesting discussion for you.
Welcome back to another episode of Coach on the Couch. For this episode, myself and Steve will be discussing the topic of trust and what is trust. Well, how do we develop that understanding of trust, and other issues such as what do we how do we kind of rebuild trust and once broken or something, so I'm sure there'll be other things that we discuss within the conversation, and hopefully it will be quite interesting and insightful exploration of that topic. So with that being said, let's get right into the episode. Welcome back again. You were only here the other week, Kaylin? Steve?
I feel like I've got an identity crisis now. I am now known as Kaylin.
No, I think you're not young enough to be my son. So
thanks.
So my thoughts for this time was to kind of maybe just do another topic that was kind of related to last time, which was relationships, but kind of to do around about trust and kind of how do we develop that, or how do we regain trust as well if it's broken, and those sort of things. And I suppose where do we really learn trust from is because we all grow up and we start to understand what it is, but how do we kind of, some of that I suppose would be experiential, wouldn't it? So through experience and different situations, but
It's an interesting concept when you start to think about it, because one of the first occasions when we hear about this word trust is when we're growing up and our parents might say, "Oh, I don't know if I can trust you," or "I want to trust you." Now, if you have no comprehension of what that word is, it's just a word. So, adults throughout generations have been saying this word to us without actually us having an idea of what it actually is. And I find that quite comical now, looking back on it. I think it's quite funny. It's like the concept of time, when a child says to you, "What time is it?" and then you tell them a time, and actually they've got no concept of what time is. But we still kind of go through the motion, and it's the same with trust. And so, we often use these words without the recipient actually understanding it. And so I think there's an obligation that we have to actually understand it ourselves as well as the recipient understanding it, and I don't think there's often that in place.
I think it's one of those things that, again, because we don't think about you said about understanding ourselves. We learn and we understand it, and as an adult, it just is. And so when you then have to then try and explain it to someone else, or to a child, for example, or that kind of thing, it takes a lot for us to really think about it, to understand it, because it wouldn't have been taught to us as this is actually what trust is. It's just something that we've experienced or learned, from growing up and associating that word with certain situations and what people have done or haven't done. Or
I mean, it's interesting when you kind of look up the different definitions of it, because I just looked it up quickly, and the similarities between them, and the two that really strike me is this sense of reliability, this sense of trustworthiness. And it kind of makes sense, really, because, we talked about when we're growing up. So how did we know that we could trust somebody? Because they were reliable. They said they were going to do something, and they went through with it.
But did we know at that point it was trust, though? Or did we just know that, oh, yeah, they're always there, and we know we can go to them?
It only became trust when we put that label, when we associate that label to it. And again, like you said, growing up, we don't associate that label until... at what point do we actually associate that label?
I know, that's exactly what my point was. So...
hand on heart, I can't say, look, at 18, I remember when I started using this word trust. Because for me, the word trust really kind of came into play was when we kind of head into the whole relationship thing, which is a kind of a whole mind mess in itself, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And so, and you're saying about it. So, yeah, I can't think of any time when I've went, oh, so that's what trust is, or whatever, it just happens. It's something that seems to just, we just make that association, and in whatever our understanding of what that and our experiences is what that is. So,
but if you think about it, though, it's not just in relationships. Obviously, we hear a lot about it in relationships, but it's also in the relationships we have with other people. So, for example, tradespeople, right? Tradespeople, for me, are classic examples of this word trust.
Yeah.
Because, I'll use my examples. I'm not picking on any particular trade, but, we'd have a builder or somebody come up and go, yes, we will be here at this time.
Yeah.
And they don't turn up.
Yeah.
Or they turn up when they like, or when they feel like it, and even then they do like half a job. And so you kind of get this feeling of, okay, so I'm not going to take it personally that it's maybe it's just him, or it's just the trait. Do you know what I mean? So, but it's when, say, another builder does it, or another builder does it, another builder does it, and suddenly you kind of get this labelling theory going on, which we're told not to do, but we do it. We label, this is what we come to expect from builders. They're unreliable, they're untrustworthiness, because they don't come when they say they're going to come up. They only do half a job. I see you laughing just me mentioning it, but it's true though, isn't it? And
oh yeah, no, I'm only laughing because you know my own issues with gardeners.
Exactly, so. And we are taught time and time again, condition: do not label, do not label, do not label. But experience has taught us that actually, this is what happens when.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we're trying to find a new partner, for example, so, again, labelling says, well, actually, this is what I come to expect from previous partners, so therefore the new partner is going to be like that, and actually we shouldn't do that. However, in our minds, it is there. Why? Because experience has taught us, well, actually, this is what happens in this situation.
Yeah, and even that, so it then becomes difficult to change that, and even to change that level of mindset, because the other thing is sometimes you have instances like it. So again, you mentioned relationships, so I suppose it's easier just to use that as an example. But you can have where you think, okay, the right thing to do is all right, or you know you're someone who does trust someone, and the more you trust them, then they go off and do something. But then if you didn't trust them, then that causes problems in a relationship as well, because then they feel a bit kind of why don't you trust them, and why, so it's sometimes it's not easy to know what to do or how to be, even, what level of, or to what degree do you trust someone, and then what degree is it that you're then infringing on, their privacy, their, I don't know, their freedoms or whatever. If you then you don't trust them with other things, or you're questioning them, or, some people go looking at messages on phones and those sort of things,
So then is trust something that is earned or expected?
Well, they say, I think when you're regaining trust, which is another aspect of it, I think there's a lot to be said in terms of earned. It's a question of then demonstrating and trying to. I don't like the word prove. It kind of just sounds too, I don't know, too forced or whatever. But demonstrating and continually presenting that you can, that trust is there, and that whatever happened that caused that mistrust or that breaking of trust is not going to happen again. But I suppose, is trust always an earned thing? I don't know. Because again, how do we learn? I mean, so that's relationship, in terms of relationship, it doesn't have to be intimate romantic relationships, but it's like, how do we know? We always, we all make friends, or, well, most of us do anyway. But some people don't like having friends or whatever, but so so I'll try not to generalize, but anyway, in general, like, most of us make kind of friends, but how do we know we make friendships? We don't go out, one of the things we don't ask ourselves when we meet people and kind of start developing friendships is, can we trust them?
But isn't that where things like kind of intuition and stuff kind of kick in? Because sometimes you kind of get a feel about someone, rightly or wrongly, and 9 times out of 10, the intuition is often proved right.
Mm-hmm. But if you didn't trust them, then would you really become friends with them? I mean, you might have an acquaintance with them if you had to mix with them or whatever, but you'd keep them at some kind of distance, would you not?
Always.
So, and I mean, and trust takes so many different forms, doesn't it? So, I mean, because that just made me think there that, if you couldn't trust, it's like, because there's always about being authentic, being open. I mean, I'm always like that. But then if you knew you couldn't trust someone, you'd be careful about what you said around someone, wouldn't you? So it's not only about just trusting either what they do, it's trusting about kind of, what they say, or what they say about you or not, or whatever as well, and all those kind of things. So it's interesting, because also I think that verges on another little phrase I heard recently, which I kind of thought was quite good, actually, all about, when people and a lot of people like gossip as well, but when they gossip about something or other, or you're hearing gossip, and they say the people who gossip to you are usually gossiping about you. So then you've got it's like, well, those sort of people, do you have to watch them then? Can they be trusted? So but trust is it's in so many forms, I think, that it's not just relationships, and it's an interesting one to know where it really comes from. because as I say, it's not something that it's not the first thing that comes to mind going, oh well, I've got to work out if I can trust them first, and then I'm going to talk to them, or I'm going to do this or whatever.
There's a lot to, there's certainly a lot to think about it when you kind of really start to unpack it. I think there's more to it kind of than meets the eye, really.
Yeah, I was just thinking there, I mean, it even comes in on a different level to even when you're working, because if you think about it, I mean, you know, you see sometimes in job descriptions or whatever about kind of working on your own initiative and all that. So there's a level of trust there from the employer to employees and stuff as well, that they're going to get on and do that work, or do that, you know, whatever it is that's expected of them. And I suppose in the same vein, then you've also got, you know, you're working for someone else, so you're trusting that they're going to pay you at the end of the day as well. So there's a level of trust in those, you know, I think there's a level of trust in most, and especially in transactional type of situations. Because even though it's transactional, you've still got to trust that each side's going to keep their end of that deal, kind of thing.
And I think this, degrees of trust, isn't it? Because I remember as a younger lad, we were talking about trust, and people saying, "Oh, we don't trust one another" and stuff like that. But then we're talking about, okay, well, if you get on public transport, for example, do you trust that the bus driver is going to get you to where you want to go? Yes. Okay. So you do trust. Well, yeah, but no, but yeah, but, and then kind of they started to kind of enter into this dialogue. Well, actually, why is it we can trust in this situation, but we can't trust in this situation? So either we trust or we can't trust. Do you know what I mean? There's that kind of
and this is all the big sort
on.
of things that I was thinking of in terms of this topic. That's what I mean. It's and there's no, I don't think there's any definitive answer to that, because I don't know where it comes from, but there's different degrees in which, like, in some situations we do and others we don't, and then there's other situations and people that you that, how can I put this, have to, right? So for example, being a blind person like myself, generally speaking, we have to trust everyone, because if we need help, we can't see what they're like, we can't see what's the, you know, and if you need to ask, and you've got to hope that the help they're going to give you, that they're going to take you to the right place or whatever. So you're, in terms of keeping yourself safe and trusting, and you were saying about buses, I mean, I've got on buses, and you trust that, you ask the bus driver, can you tell me if it's not going to be a familiar area, or if, you know, you've never gone to this particular stop before, that you ask them, oh, you know, you want this stop, and can they let you know when you get there, and they'll go, oh yeah, and then, like, the amount of times that it's happened to me that they forget. And okay, they might have forgotten, and it's not their, you know, that's not their fault in some ways. But then, you know, you're trusting them that they're going to remember, and as part of their job, that they're going to be able to do that. And then, you know, so that there's a, you know, for me, there's, like, anytime I'm out, you've the amount of trust you have to put into people is a fair bit, and you know, it's like you can't really afford not to, and you can't, you know, but you have to. Then it's a problem, because you've got to think of your own safety and other things like that, whether that's safety as in being abducted or beaten up, or safety as in just general getting around safety and stuff. But the level of trust, you've just got to trust, and that's it, and it's kind of almost a risk at the same time. So which majority of people wouldn't need to do, if you've got vision, you can see where you are, you can assess what, your situation or whatever. So so I think that's that's another interesting take on it, because there's some people have to always trust others, whether they want to or not,
Like if you're doing a parachute jump, you'd have to trust that the person packed the parachute right.
Yeah, you got to trust that the parachute are open.
Exactly.
So yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of trust goes on. As I say, it goes into quite a lot of things, really.
So how? I mean, I'm just thinking in regards to our listeners. So, for example, how if somebody said, "Look, I want some help building back up trust," so maybe the partner had cheated, for example. I'm just thinking about relationships because I think the easiest thing to chat about, really, and maybe a partner being unfaithful or hadn't done something right, for example. How would you help somebody rebuild that trust?
Is that so which person are we on about? Because there's the person who's cheated, and I suppose is the one who has to show that they're trustworthy again, and then there's a person who was cheated on that has to be able to trust that person too.
That's right. That's very true.
So
That's a good point.
So, I mean, as I said earlier, if in terms of cheating, what very simplistic case. I mean, obviously, if you're working and coaching and going through sessions with people, you'd look at stuff in more detail and things. But in a simplistic form, you know that the person who's cheated, if they really kind of want to be with that person and were regretful about what happened, and they've got to be willing to be able to show and prove that they can be retrusted. Now, some of that might be one of the things that they could ask the other, or be not asked. They may need to accept from the other person is that the person who was cheated on, that they cheated on, is entitled to monitor their messages on their phone. Now, it's not very nice, because you could say that, well, that's an invasion of their privacy, but that it was the privacy that had a bearing on the cheating. So if you're going to regain someone's trust, then you've got to be completely open. And I think there's also a level of good communication, but then that's important in relationships anyway. But it's a question of showing, being accountable, and being able to prove where you are or where you've been, or and that might not be very nice at the beginning, but if you really want the person that to still be, you still want to be with that person, they want you want them to be with you, and for that trust to regain, then it's the person who would have done the cheating has to put a lot of work in, and you've got to want it. So that's one thing. The person who's been cheated on, and for them to regain that level of belief that they can trust that person again, is only really going to come from the amount of work that the other one does. So the more they're open, the more the more communication there is, and the more that other person can show them, the easier it's going to become for them to trust. Now, again, we're back to people are different though. This is where we come full circle about where does our understanding and learning of trust come from, because there's some people that will never give someone a second chance anyway. There's some people in relationships if something goes wrong, they're let down, or they're, you know, if they were cheated on, or they're you know, they're let down in some way, they won't let that go, and they won't give you know, someone a second chance at a relationship or whatever. They'll just move on. So now, what other things that says about those people is a different thing. I mean, that's not for topic today, but you know, so you've got that anyway. It depends on what that particular person's going to be like. Whether, you know, if they're that way, then you'll never regain their trust as such. So for me, as I say, my thoughts on it is like, there's a lot of work has to go into it. Is the easiest response.
You know what? I'm not too sure. I think it depends on the circumstances, doesn't it? Because, and again, it depends on that person's experiences of it as well. So, if it's a repetitive pattern that keeps on happening, then they've already built up those defensive walls.
Mm-hmm.
So to actually break through those is going to be quite hard. If you're the person who's obviously being cheated on, for example, if you're the person who has to try and build that trust back up again, that for me, I think that's a lot easier to deal with in some ways, because it's about showing that level of trust. It's about that commitment. It's about that repetition of reliability. So it's about building up that record, if you like, which is okay. But again, if the person on the other end is in a place where actually they're not going to forgive you, they're not going to move on, then the chance to build up that trust is almost zero. So you could do everything that you're supposed to do, but if that person's not going to trust you, they're not going to trust you, full stop. So you're almost flogging a dead horse. So you could do all the right things, but if the other person is in a place to accept what you're doing, then actually you may as well not bother, really. And it's a shame, because in some relationships they are broken, and there's no real fixing of them, and that's just the way it is.
So, I don't want to. It's just because it's come to mind, so I'm going to throw it in, just to mix it up a bit. But obviously, I don't want us to get off and go off on different tangents a bit. But so, I totally agree with everything you just said. However, should that person still try and show and prove that they can be trusted, even if the other person is at a place where they don't forgive, they don't, or, you know, they don't want to know anymore, or whatever, they were cheated on, they were let down, whatever, but there's children involved?
Okay, I wasn't expecting that last bit of curveball. I was okay with the first part, but where there's children involved, I think to a degree you can only do so much. So whether there's children involved or not, I think yes, it is a lot harder, because obviously their children's level of understanding is going to be completely different. So their cognitive
obviously
ability and their understanding.
I didn't give an age range, so, you know, yeah, I get that.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, you could give me any age group, and the mental capacity of kind of understanding what's going on is, you know, you don't really fully develop it as an adult until, I mean, they say you're an adult at 18, but you're still not fully developed. You're still not like fully experienced. You still can't comprehend stuff. So,
my personal view would be that being through a few breakups and having children and other things like that, I feel, and the approach I would probably, you know, take and bring into my own practice and stuff like that, would be that if I was dealing with someone who had to show or needed to build up that, you know, try and build up and prove that they're trustworthy again, I think it isn't. I still think it's an important thing, because I think it's still important to show that and to be able to show that to your children, because even if you don't regain that reputation and that trustworthiness or that forgiveness from the the other parent or the ex-partner or whoever it is, your children, you have to do right by your children. So I think it's still vitally important to show that you can be trusted, because even if that other person didn't trust you, you want your children to be able to trust you.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that relationship with the children as much as possible.
So
without a doubt, I think. Because in some ways children aren't daft. They are capable of making their own minds up. And so, just because one partner feels a certain way doesn't mean to say that actually they're going to feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're all they're people in their own rights as well. They're just little people.
They are indeed little people. This is very true.
But just doesn't matter what their understanding is. They're still individuals in their own right. So, and I think everyone they deserve the same amount of effort, and they might not understand whatever the situation was and what's caused a lot of stuff, but at least if they can see, if they understand, and they can relate and understand that they can trust that person still just as much as the other that they because if they can trust both parents, no matter whether the parents trust each other or not, then that's a win for, from that point of view. And at least there's still a healthy relationship between the children, no matter what's going on with the adults and stuff. So I just thought I'd throw that in, just to say that I think there is sometimes, even though you think, oh well, what's the point, there's certain situations to say that I think it's still important that if there's trust to be built again, that you still put that work in and that effort in. We'll have to see what the next one will bring. You're not with me for the next one, are you? You're off doing Christmas stuff for the next month or so, all the build up of all of that. So you're a busy person. So the next one's going to be quite near Christmas, and hopefully it'll be just as good. It'll be a bit different, but I'll leave it like that for now until nearer the time. And thanks for your time again today, Steve, and thanks for everyone for listening, and we'll be back shortly. Bye for now.
Bye.
Welcome back to this outro, and in today's episode we heard all about trust. We discussed and explored the topic of trust, and how do we develop trusting others, and kind of is a lot of it kind of experiential. How do we understand what that word means, and where do we learn that from? We looked at things like kind of regaining someone's trust once broken, and the different levels of we trust in these particular situations, not in others. And I also put another kind of perspective on it from a point of view of someone with a sensory impairment. So as someone who can't see, how much trust you have to have in others all the time, and when you're asking for help or support, and to get anywhere, or all those sort of things. And one thing we didn't kind of mention, and it kind of dawned on me after kind of me and Steve had finished, was there's a lot of organizations, also build a lot of brands, or they sell their business on things like trust. So you have definitely in terms of the UK, you've got a couple of businesses, or you've got a business to do with me and Steve did mention about tradespeople on the podcast, and you've got a business that's called Trusted Trader, and that's all about people can go there, they can look up these tradespeople that are registered on there, and they're meant to be trusted people and trustworthy tradesmen that can come in and do and you can rely on them, and they're honest people and that kind of thing. So, and that's their kind of brand, and that's that's that particular online business's brand and selling point of and how they do their business by bringing on these tradesmen and whatever registration they and criteria they have to meet to go through registration to be part of that. But and then you got other online platforms, such as like you look at things like Trustpilot for companies and businesses, and people putting reviews on there. Now, I mean, the only thing with that is that your reviews are going to be people's own opinions, and so but just the whole kind of aspect of that is that obviously they're still using that level of trust and saying, well, if it's got a high rating and reviews rating and things like that that business is likely to be very trustworthy, and you can trust that they're going to do a good job or whatever. So Trustpilot works in the same way, and it's and they use that in their name, and that's their branding. So it's an interesting subject, and trust, it's amazing how much and how many things and how much trust comes into it, to a lot of things. So hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will be back. Well, as I say, we like Steve's not going to unfortunately be able to be here for the next one, but I'll be back with a slightly different kind of podcast. Maybe it's going to be a bit more of a lighter type of podcast episode, being that we're coming up to Christmas. So, I'll be here with another episode for you in a couple of weeks. So until then, thanks very much for listening again, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the fortnightly Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Stephen Alexander Simmons. You can find this podcast on the following platforms: Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts, and more platforms to follow. You can leave comments and feedback directly on the Anchor platform, or you can contact us directly by emailing us at coachonthecouch22@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to being with you soon.